This is NICU Babies Parent Support with Catherine Whitaker, a podcast from Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit that provides free personalized support, resources, and community before, during, and after a NICU stay. My conversations here will focus on education and personal stories with medical and hospital professionals, counselors, therapists, and NICU moms and dads from across the country. Whether you're preparing for a NICU stay, you're currently there, or you're months and years past your stay, you belong here. The NICU is hard. We're here to help. I'm your host, Catherine Whitaker, the mom of 6 children, including my very own NICU baby, and I'm so honored you're here. Hey, y'all. Welcome back to the podcast. So I wanted to have a conversation with an OBGYN. They are, for most of us, the very first person that we see when we find out that we're pregnant, and they are the person who walks with us all the way through our pregnancies, and some of them even post-delivery, because we have more babies or we have a hospital stay or whatever, and we get a chance to see them again. And so I knew that it was, above all the interactions that we have with the doctor, it's the one that we carry with us the longest as women, and it's certainly the one doctor that knows us best. And so I felt like it would be a great conversation to visit about what it's like to have a high-risk pregnancy. Some of y'all walking into your NICU stays definitely know that you're going to have a NICU stay, and then some of you walk into your pregnancies and have no idea until you get to the end that this is the way that it's going to be. So my guest today is Dr. Jenny Summers. Dr. Summers is Texan born. Love that. She's also loves working with women throughout every stage and life stage of their women's health. She's a Longhorn, and she's a former child life specialist who completed her medical school at UT Health Science Center in San Antonio, and then her residency training at UT Southwestern, serving as the chief resident during her 4th year. She's completed a gynecologic advanced pelvic and robotic fellowship. Very smart, very talented. And she also currently serves as a clinical assistant professor at the University of Texas Dell Medical School. And she's been awarded a Rising Star as one of Texas Monthly's super doctors for the past 4 years. Let's chat. Well, Dr. Summers, thank you for joining me. I have a billion questions for you, but I should start with, so in your bio, it said that you went to the University of Texas. For those people who are listening who may not fully appreciate interstate rivalry, I'm a Texas Aggie and you're a Longhorn. So I love that we're having this conversation together. It's really nice. So I loved that I read in your bio that you were formerly a child life specialist, but what I'm interested is, of all the experiences that you had, what was it that made you choose medical school? And of all the specialties that you could choose, why obstetrics and gynecology?
So child life is great for one aspect of healthcare. You get to be with the social and emotional development of children and their families. And I really craved more of the educational component and that constant interaction of the medical, the surgical, truly all encompassing. So that's what led me to pursue further into medical school. As far as, looking forward and how to choose a specialty, I like operating. I like continuity of care, and women's health really does give you the access to be with women through all stages of their life. From, I have patients that are teens all the way up into their mid 60s, late 70s. And so to be able to be with them through all of those components and not having to send them elsewhere.
Certainly people trust you. I mean, they've got the ability to, I know I think of my own OB and I think about the relationships and the things that I share with him. You're sharing probably the most intimate part of you as a person with someone else, and you get to follow them. Unlike pediatrics, where maybe that care ends at 18, you get them kind of for your whole life. So I love that you chose that. So high risk OB and certainly high-risk pregnancies get a lot of press and a lot of coverage, but I think maybe we should start back and start over and say, what would you consider to be either a high-risk pregnancy that you might work with, or a case that you might work with as an OB?
We see more and more high-risk pregnancies today. Women are having children later in life. So anyone 34 turning 35 and older is deemed, I hate the terminology, but advanced maternal age.
We all hate that. We all hate that terminology.
It's terrible.
It is terrible.
We should rename it.
I agree.
But that puts us in a high risk category. diabetes in pregnancy, high blood pressure, even history of depression, multiples. There are a whole constellation of reasons that we fall into a high risk category. And so in this point in our medical field, there are more commonly high risk pregnancies than not.
So there are probably two different categories of women that they may find themselves in. So I was in the first category, is that I knew that I was going to be high risk about 20 weeks into my own pregnancy. And so we made some changes, but there may be some women that don't know that they're high risk until the very end of their pregnancy. So maybe for someone who knows that they have maybe some of those factors that you listed, or they go to their geriatric ultrasound at 20 weeks and find out that they may have some risk factors that put them into a different category. What should be some things that they maybe should ask their OB, like, are you qualified to maybe take me from now until birth, or do I need to look for someone else? So what are some questions that they should ask, and what are some things that they should look for in their OB if they find themselves before pregnancy or before delivery in a sort of high risk category?
I think if you know you're high risk going into it, either with a personal history, obstetrical history, or looking forward, you really need to look at the hospital you're delivering at. That plays a big role. So level 3 and level 4 NICUs are very important, as well as there's maternal designations now. For instance, our hospital is a level 4 maternity center. That means we can take care of the sickest of the sick as far as moms and babies go, because there's high risk moms and there's also high risk babies. As far as an obstetrician, yes, you need to make sure they're comfortable with all aspects of high risk, and they should be able to tell you at the time of a consultation whether or not they're capable of taking care of all of those things and what their designations are at the hospital that they practice at. The other thing I would consider is looking at the group as a whole. Your obstetrician is there as much as possible, but there are times where our colleagues, it's a collaborative effort, and so you want to make sure you're comfortable with the group in its entirety and that everyone is capable of taking care of high risk pregnancies in totality.
Yeah, I mean, some people may find themselves, depending on what city they live in or where they deliver in, they may have anyone. I think my first pregnancy, I had about 8 different OBs that could have delivered our baby, and my favorite one, fortunately, was the one that delivered. Although I love them all, but nobody could substitute for Dr. Teeter. But I do know that when I found myself in a high risk pregnancy, my OB didn't have what you mentioned. She wasn't able to deliver at she didn't have delivery privileges at a hospital that had the kind of NICU that we were going to need for our baby. So midstream, we had to change OBs, and that was a little bit stressful. But now that I'm thinking, maybe we did it the right way. Maybe I did ask the right questions, but those are really great to ask. So if a woman maybe finds herself in some of those high risk categories, Mr. Summers, what are some things that maybe we can do to either mitigate some of those risk factors, or maybe if we find ourselves in the NICU, which I know most people listening to this have either had a baby in the NICU or might find themselves right there right now, what are some things that they can do to maybe make that entry into the NICU and post a little bit easier that they can do before the baby's delivered?
I think touring the NICU is very important, especially if you know you're going to be there. Meeting with the neonatologist and the team. There is generally like a social worker that can work with you to kind of just help, or a clinical care coordinator, just for comfort and those basic needs of where do I go? What am I looking at? What to anticipate. Those things really do help mitigate that added stress of already having a stressful time and situation during a critical bonding period as well. And then, hand to hold is a great option, right? There are community resources out there that can help too. Those are things that I would think help
I love that I didn't
decrease our
even pay
risk.
you to say that. You just said that. Thank you for that. Yes, Hand to Hold has a
Sure.
ton of resources that are available to families at no cost to them, which I think sometimes when you find yourself in a new situation, or maybe it's preeclampsia that puts you into the NICU or some other risk factor, maybe it's something that they identify during ultrasound, during one of your anatomy scans, that they find and say, yeah, that means that you're probably going to be spending a little bit of time in the NICU. I know one thing that we did is we had this great community of support. And I don't think that any of them had ever been in the NICU, but they loved our family. And that certainly made the transition between, going between both home and hospital. But also, I mean, I don't think that we knew what we needed until we got into it. But I think all those things remind people it's okay to educate yourself, and not that you should plan for the worst case scenario, but I don't know, just like when you buy a house, you go look at it and you're like, this is where we're going to live. And you may be living in the NICU for a little while. So it's okay to walk around, ask some questions. I don't think anybody's going to get kicked out because they're asking questions about how things are run at the
Absolutely not.
NICU. Yeah. So I'd love to know what some of the things are that you do with your patients, maybe when you're working through some of their delivery options, because I know there are a lot of ways that babies can be delivered, some stressful, some not so stressful. So when you're looking at a high risk pregnancy, what are some things that you think moms can do to maybe make the delivery part a little bit less stressful, or some options that you may have for them as they sort of prepare for that big day?
So for our high risk pregnancies and those that are a little bit more complicated, we work in consultation with a maternal fetal medicine specialist that are board certified in high risk obstetrics. And they're truly consultants. They don't do deliveries, but it's more of a collaborative effort to kind of say, okay, these are our expectations. And so, those weekly meetings, 36 weeks and on, if we make it to that point and we know we're going to the NICU, we're kind of touching base, and that repetition of what to expect and where we are helps. Obstetrics, as many people know, is very unpredictable. But the preemies, when we're getting closer in that third trimester, I think as well, working in collaboration with the hospital as well as the maternal fetal medicine and even our anesthesiologist, if things go awry, helps to have kind of more of a care conference aspect. So that's one thing that we do to help mitigate those risks, and any sort of specialists that are involved, such as cardiologists, urologists, what have you, that we may need. So that's what I typically do.
So I'll back up a little bit, because maternal fetal medicine might be a specialty that maybe not everybody. I certainly didn't know what it was until I found myself in their office. Um, Is that something that your OB sort of leads you to? Like, if they say, hey, these are some of the risk factors, then we're going to send you to maternal fetal medicine, or do you have to do that on your own? I guess I'm trying to give people an idea of where they need to advocate for themselves and where their doctor needs to advocate for them.
I think that's really the OB-GYN's component, to be able to say, this is something you need to see the maternal fetal medicine specialist in conjunction with me, and these are the reasons why. So once we get to not just advanced maternal age, high risk pregnancy, but we start to add in, you mentioned any suspected fetal abnormalities, we definitely bring the consultants on board. They can do more involved ultrasonography, help with determining either mode of delivery or timing. And so it's more of a collaborative effort.
We loved our maternal fetal medicine doctor so much, we ended up naming our son his middle name. So I think
Oh,
sometimes people worry about, like, what's the relationship going to be like? And like, am I
right.
going to lose the relationship with my OB, and now am I going to be transferred over to maternal fetal medicine? Like, how does that work? So that's good to hear that it's a good collaborative effort, I think, in best case scenario.
Yes, and it is important to note, particularly here, there are some practices in other cities where the maternal fetal medicine groups will take on patients and do their own deliveries, but that's not our practice model. In general, I don't believe that's the practice model in Austin proper. So they are truly there to continue, but you maintain your relationship with your obstetrician.
You just get a bonus, doctor. That's the way we looked at it.
Exactly. And if someone were to ever ask me, hey, I'd like to see the specialist and just discuss X, Y, or Z, no one is ever going to fall to you for wanting a second opinion or wanting to see a specialist as well. I think education and knowledge is power. And if you feel like you need that for peace of mind, your, more in-depth anatomy scan, what have you, then that's more than reasonable as well.
Yeah, I remember when we had a conversation with our maternal fetal medicine doctor, there was some testing that they wanted to do, and it was foreign to us, and I had no idea. We'd never done it before. And I remember calling my OB, and I was like, can we just talk about this? Like, he mentioned this and that. Like, what do you think? And it was really nice to have someone else who, I mean, obviously knew us well, been my OB for a long time, but also understood that the risks of our pregnancy. And so it was really great to have her feedback and then to visit with him, and for it to be a real dialogue. So it wasn't just like it was the edict on high, like, this is what you must do. I was really grateful for the different opinions that really both of them kind of walked us through that. So thank you for reminding us that they can work together and that you should ask some questions. I mean, it's a big deal. It's a big part of your life. And you should never apologize for advocating, for your baby or for you as the delivering moms. This podcast is produced by Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit, but we're more than simply a podcast. Be sure to download our app, Join one of our support groups or find one-to-one support. Enjoy counseling, find loss and bereavement support, participate in a peer-to-peer mentor program, or check out our news, articles, and family stories at handtohold.org. All of that is at no cost to you. Hand to Hold's mission is to provide personalized support before, during, and after a NICU stay to help ensure that all NICU families thrive. There's a lot of moms, Dr. Summers, that may find themselves really stressed out because of a high-risk pregnancy. Maybe part of it may be pre-existing. Maybe they have anxiety or depression beforehand. I know you mentioned that is one of the risk factors. So at what point, I guess, when a mom finds herself maybe at a breaking point, like, I am very stressed out, I'm very anxious about all of this, can we provide some additional help? So when would you suggest, and what questions would you suggest that mom ask a doctor, like, do I need therapy or counseling? Do I need medication? What's safe for the baby? At what point do you think we sort of fall beyond what's normal when that in that kind of a stressful situation and what's not normal and might need some additional intervention?
That's a good question. Maternal health is on the forefront of all of our minds. I think the pandemic really brought out how much our mental health is important and what an impact stress can have on it. We have a multitude of resources. We're screening for postpartum depression, potential anxiety from the beginning of your pregnancy. We screen again in the third trimester, postpartum, and even we do a phone call. We check in at 3 weeks postpartum because we know that's when we're highest risk postpartum to begin to experience those postpartum depression symptoms, not just blues. So that's one aspect. And I think every visit when you meet with your OB-GYN, that's the time frame to have that conversation of if you're feeling overwhelmed and this is not just situational over the past couple of weeks, but this is really kind of inking up into your underlying anxiety, then that's the time frame. And we work with several different avenues to get people plugged in, be it with therapists or psychiatrists or both, as needed in conjunction with us. And many of us are comfortable with initiating care, but Texas in general has recognized this as becoming a more of a crisis situation. And so there's even a hotline for us to call in the acute setting to help get the care that women need in that regard.
It was interesting. I was having some conversations with some women who were older, like 60s or 70s, and they sort of looked at us like we were crazy. Like, I would have never asked my OB those questions, or I would have never advocated for myself in that way. Whereas I was visiting with some moms in their 20s and their 30s, and so the questions that they're asking their OB, I'm thinking, I think I thought to ask. I have 6 kids. I don't think that I thought to ask that question until like babies number 5 and 6, because it was sort of this taboo subject. Like, you can't ask your OB about mental health because remember, she's just there for the delivery part. Like all of the female things, but mental health sort of became like this other thing. And I think most of us started to realize that they're very interconnected and that it's okay and probably incredibly appropriate to ask your OB-GYN and say, like, not just around delivery time, but you know me best. How can we work through this? I remember I called my OB. I was actually several months past delivering my fifth baby, and I called her and I'm like, I can't do this anymore. And she gave me some great resources, but mostly she listened. And I was really grateful for that relationship. Like you said, you don't get that with any other doctor. So it's a beautiful thing.
Right. And that's part of why we added in that 3 week phone call check-in as far as, it used to be kind of like a breakup. So what we'd say, all right,
Oh,
we've delivered your baby. I'll see you in 6 weeks. And then from there in a year,
right.
that's a long time to go without checking in with someone that knows you quite well. So I do think that's kind of helped as far as picking up in the screening aspect, anyone that's in those trenches and can't even recognize where they are.
Right. So if there's a mom listening as an OB-GYN, what's the best piece of advice that you would give her?
For what?
Really, I think if she finds herself probably staring down a NICU stay, like if she finds herself either in the NICU right now or she has a high risk pregnancy and she knows that she's going to be in the NICU, what advice would you give her?
Give her, lean on everyone you can as much as possible and know you're not alone. There are many women that have been through this, and the more questions you ask, don't there is no question that is a stupid question, and we're all here to help. And no one is going to be exacerbated or flabbergasted that you're asking those, because even the basic ones, when you're in a stressful situation, you don't think straight. That's what we're here for. So turn to however that is, and make sure you're comfortable if you have that choice as far as, delivery and NICU and all those things, that you're really comfortable with your care team.
That's a good way to end it. Dr. Summers, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
So I knew that y'all were going to love that interview. There are just a few takeaways that I feel like are important to share as you sort of listen to our conversation about what it's like to have a high-risk pregnancy, ways in which that you can either mitigate the risk, or what do you do when you find out that you're high risk. There were two things that Dr. Summers said that I really want to hone in on. The first is that this relationship that you have with your doctor is one that you're going to have for a long time. So make sure that you are unafraid to ask for help. This is a woman or a man who's going to be with you throughout your pregnancy, and certainly well past that, and maybe even into your next pregnancy. And there's someone who knows you well. And so don't be afraid to ask them either for their opinion. Certainly if you have a situation where you also have a maternal fetal medicine doctor and you have an OB-GYN, just that good correlation between the two, but really the good communication with you, and just making sure that you ask for help when you need it. So really seeing them as a partner in this, as opposed to just the person that shows up and helps deliver your baby. For many of us, that can be a really traumatic experience. And for those of us, sometimes the pregnancy delivery is super easy and it's not until afterwards, but I think that doctor knows you best. So I thought her advice of making sure that there's a good communication line open, and then always asking for help. So I look forward to seeing you all again next week. Thanks, y'all, for listening to NICU Babies Parent Support. Every parent and every experience is welcome here. If you are a NICU parent and you're finding yourself in need of support, please download our app. You can find it in the Apple Store or on Google Play, Hand to Hold. And if you loved today's episode, you can share it, you can subscribe, and you can most certainly review it. We would love your reviews. It's how we reach more NICU parents. Thanks, and I'll see y'all next time.